The year was 1872, and the sun over Mercy Ridge burned with the color of vengeance. The wind dragged dust through the empty street, whispering secrets against splintered boards and hollow hearts. Men stood outside the saloon with faces carved by grit and whiskey, watching the newcomer ride in. His name was Elias Carter, no badge, no brand, no promise to anyone. Just a man with a worn saddle and eyes that had seen too much of both war and man. He carried himself like one who'd tried to forget and failed. He reined his horse to a stop near the well, boots hitting dirt with the heavy sound of purpose. A few faces turned away, others lingered long enough to weigh him. Soldier, drifter, maybe trouble. The sign hanging crooked above the general store read, Mercy Ridge, trade, tame, and trust. But the air smelled like none of those things. It reeked of fear and rot beneath the desert sun. Elias loosened the reins and looked around. The town was built from desperation and silver that ran dry years ago, leaving only the greed that mined it. A church with no bell tower. A sheriff's office with the windows blackened from smoke. A gallows that hadn't yet turned to dust. He could taste the quiet wrongness of the place like grit between his teeth. He stepped toward the saloon, but the sound stopped him. A sharp crack, then laughter. Not the good kind. The kind men use when cruelty's too easy to resist. Elias turned. At the edge of the square, a crowd had gathered. A woman stood bound to a post, her hands tied, a burlap hood covering her head, rope cinched tight around her arms. The sign beside her read in crude letters, "One woman, $2." The man running the sale was big, sweat staining his vest dark, his eyes small and mean. Beside him, Sheriff Dole, thick-mustached, wearing the badge like a brand of ownership, leaned against a post, chewing tobacco. His voice rolled slow and smug across the square. "Now, folks, she ain't worth more'n a meal and a drink, but law's law. Thief gets sold, work gets paid, $2 flat. No bargaining that." The crowd laughed again. Coins jingled. Elias stood still. The war had taught him many things, how to survive, how to kill, how to walk away. But he'd also learned the weight of looking the other way. Somewhere, buried deep beneath dust and scars, that lesson still burned. He walked closer. The sheriff noticed. "Something you need, stranger?" "Maybe." Elias's voice was quiet, steady. "What's her crime?" Dole spat into the dirt. "Stealin'. Bread and whiskey from Dunley store. Her kind don't learn easy, so we teach hard." "What's her name?" The sheriff smirked. "Ain't got one that matters." The woman lifted her head slightly. The burlap hit her face, but her posture didn't belong to someone broken. There was defiance in the way she stood, still and silent, like she'd chosen not to speak rather than lost the right. Elias reached into his vest and pulled out $2 silver, coins dulled by years, edges worn from old hands. He stepped forward and placed them on the table. The laughter died. Dole raised a brow. "You buyin' her?" "I'm buyin' her freedom." "Same price, different fool." The sheriff's tone curdled into amusement. "Ain't my concern what you do after. Just don't come cryin' when she gets you in your sleep." Elias untied the rope. The woman stumbled once, caught herself. Her wrists were raw. She didn't thank him, just looked at him through the coarse cloth, her breathing steady. He could feel the eyes of the town pressing on him like heat, men muttering, women whispering. He turned, guiding her toward the edge of the square. Behind him, Dole's voice carried. "Mercy Ridge don't take kindly to saints, stranger. You might have bought trouble, not peace." Elias didn't answer. The woman followed, her steps uncertain, silent. They reached the outskirts of town, where the desert began swallowing the land again. He handed her his canteen. She hesitated, then drank. The hood came off slowly, her fingers trembling just once. Her hair was matted from dust, her face streaked with dirt, but her eyes, sharp, amber, unyielding, met his without flinching. "You didn't have to," she said, voice hoarse but steady. "I know." She studied him for a long moment, like she was measuring the distance between mercy and motive. "You from around here?" "No," he looked back toward the town. "Just passing through." "That's good." Her tone carried no gratitude, because Mercy Ridge doesn't let strangers leave easy. Elias almost smiled, but there was nothing funny about the truth in her words. What did you steal? Bread. A pause, and a ledger. He frowned. A ledger? She nodded. Names. Dole's men. The ones he sells. He remembered a sign. One woman, $2, his jaw tightened. Why'd you take it? Her eyes hardened. Because my father was one of them. A silence stretched between them. In it, Elias heard the creak of leather, the whisper of distant wind. Where's the book now? He asked. Hidden. She turned away, scanning the horizon like she expected death to come galloping any second. You got a name? He asked. She hesitated. Mira. Elias, he replied. Don't waste it, she said. Names don't live long out here. He almost laughed, but then the sound came, a rifle cocking, distant but close enough to mean trouble. Elias spun, eyes narrowing. On the ridge behind them stood two riders, silhouettes dark against the red sun. Dole's men, Mira muttered. Yeah, Elias said softly. Figured as much. The first shot hit the dirt near his boots, spraying sand. He grabbed Mira's arm and pulled her behind a boulder. Another shot rang out. Closer. Mira hissed, You should have left me there. Wouldn't have made much difference, he replied. He drew his revolver, checked the cylinder, 5 bullets left. The sound of hooves thundered closer. Elias peered over the rock. 2 riders, maybe more behind. He waited until they were near enough to smell the dust off their coats. Then he fired. The first man fell, hoarse screaming, dust rising like smoke. The second turned his gun, but Elias was faster. The shot echoed through the emptiness, sharp and final. When silence returned, it carried the weight of everything that had just begun. Elias holstered his gun, breath steady. Mira stared at the fallen man. You killed them. They were planning to return the favor. Her gaze lingered on the bodies. Now they'll send more. Then we keep moving. Mira looked at him, eyes narrowing. You don't even know me. Elias met her stare, voice low. Don't need to. I know what it's like to be left behind. The wind picked up again, rolling through the canyon, carrying with it the faint echo of gunfire and something darker, the promise of pursuit. Elias tightened the strap on his holster and turned toward the setting sun. Come on, he said. We've got ground to cover before night. Mira hesitated, then followed. The light bled red across the desert. And behind them, the town of Mercy Ridge stood silent again, just another place where silver had bought silence, and a single man had dared to spend it on something else. The dust swallowed their tracks, but not their fate. The night stretched wide across the desert, a black ocean stitched with stars. The fire crackled low between them, throwing thin shadows that danced across the stone. Elias sat sharpening his knife, the rasp of steel against flint steady as a heartbeat. Across the flames, Mira watched him with cautious eyes. The silence between them wasn't comfort, it was survival. Every sound outside the fire's reach could be danger. They'd ridden until the horses trembled, stopping only when the desert refused to give them more distance. Mercy Ridge was a ghost now, but Elias knew Dole's kind didn't let ghosts rest. He'd seen too many men like that, greedy, mean, afraid of losing the power their guns gave them. The sheriff would come, and when he did, the desert would drink again. You keep quiet for someone who just started a war, Mira said at last, voice dry as the wind. Elias didn't look up. Talking don't stop bullets. Neither does silence. He paused, blade halfway through its motion. Her tone carried no gratitude, only warning. She'd spent too long under someone's boot to believe in heroes. He understood that. Once he believed in the same illusion, back when uniforms were supposed to mean righteousness, not ruin. You ever fight in the war? She asked suddenly. He hesitated. Once. Long enough to know no one wins. Mira leaned back against a rock, her eyes reflecting the firelight. Then you already understand Dole. He fought, too, under a flag that didn't care who it buried. When the fighting ended, he just made himself a new kind of battlefield. Elias looked at her. And you? Mine started when he hanged my father. She spoke the words flatly, without tremor or tears. He was a prospector, found silver near the ridge before Dole claimed it. When he refused to hand over the claim, Dole accused him of theft and strung him up, called it justice. The mine became his, and so did everyone working it. Elias stared into the flames, jaw tight. And the ledger? It holds every name, every man, woman, and child Dole sold into labor. Every coin he took from their blood. He keeps it locked in his office, but I copied what I could before they caught me. That's why he wanted me silenced. The wind shifted, blowing smoke between them. Elias studied her face, the quiet strength behind the anger, the fear buried beneath her resolve. She wasn't just fighting for revenge. She was fighting to remember that justice still had a place in this world. You could have run, he said softly. I tried, she replied, but you can't outrun what owns you. Elias said nothing more. He threw another stick into the fire, the sparks rising like lost souls. By dawn, they were moving again. The desert stretched endless, dunes folding into mountains of gold and rust. Every hour felt heavier, as if the land itself conspired to slow them. Flies buzzed near the horses' eyes, sweat carved lines through dust on their faces. At midday, they stopped near a dried creek bed. Mira knelt beside the cracked earth, tracing a line in the dust with her finger. Dole's mine is a day's ride west. If he's still hoarding silver, that's where he'll be sending his men from. You mean to go there, Elias said. She met his gaze. You think saving me was the end of it? He'll hunt me until I'm buried. The only way this ends is if we end him first. Elias studied her, the desert wind tugging at his shirt. He'd told himself he was done fighting other people's wars, yet here he was again, standing at the edge of another one. He thought of the soldiers he'd left behind, the burning houses, the faces of those he didn't save. Maybe this was his chance to balance the scales. All right, he said, but we'll need more than anger. Mira gave a thin smile. Good thing I have more than that. They rode through canyons narrow as knife wounds, moving only when the sun began to fall. The shadows stretched long and restless. Somewhere behind them, dust rose, a faint cloud on the horizon. They're tracking us, Elias muttered. Then let's make them regret it. They reached an old chapel just before dusk. Its steeple had collapsed, half buried in sand, but its walls still stood. Inside, the air was cool, filled with the smell of rot and old prayer. Elias pushed open the doors, revolver ready. No sound but wind and the soft creak of wood. Mira lit a small lamp. My father used to bring me to one like this. Said God don't live in churches, only in men who remember what's right. Elias leaned against a pew. You believe that? She hesitated. I want to. Outside, the first shot came sudden, a splinter of wood exploding from the doorframe. Elias ducked low. They found us. Gunfire erupted, echoing through the ruins. Mira snuffed the lamp, plunging them into half-darkness. Elias moved fast, firing through the cracks in the wall. Two figures dropped, others scattered behind rocks. Mira crouched beside him, clutching a small revolver she'd taken from one of Dole's men earlier. Her hands trembled once, then steadied. Keep low, Elias ordered. You don't have to tell me twice. A bullet whistled past his ear. He returned fire, each shot sharp and deliberate. When the echoes finally faded, only the wind answered. He stepped outside, gun drawn, scanning the bodies. The desert was quiet again. Mira joined him. Her face was pale, streaked with grime, but her eyes were alive. That was 5 men, she said. Dole's got more. He'll send them all, Elias said. She looked toward the horizon. Then we end it before he can. They built a small campfire inside the chapel that night, the flames low and cautious. Elias sat apart, cleaning his gun. Mira watched him from across the room. You're not doing this for me, she said finally. You're doing it because you lost someone. He froze for a moment, then resumed cleaning. A wife and a boy. What happened? The war happened. Then greed. Men like Dole. She nodded slowly. Then you know what it means to bury the past before it buries you. For the first time, he met her gaze fully. "No," he said quietly. "I've been digging in it ever since." The silence that followed wasn't heavy. It was understanding. Two broken lives crossing paths in a land that only respected the strong, yet finding strength in each other's scars. Before dawn, they found their horses gone. Tracks led back, toward the ridge, fresh, deliberate. Dole's men had stolen them while they slept. Elias swore under his breath, "We'll have to move on foot." They gathered what they could and started walking toward the rising sun. Hours later, the sound of hoofbeats returned. Too many to fight, too close to run. Mira's face hardened. "Go. I can slow them." Elias grabbed her arm. "No." She pulled free. "If they take me again, they'll kill you trying to get me back." Before he could answer, the riders appeared over the rise, Dole's badge gleaming in the lead. He fired once, twice, but they surrounded him before he could reload. Mira shouted his name, but hands pulled her away into the dust. When the world stopped spinning, Elias found himself bound, wrists cut from a rope. Dole grinned down at him, spitting dust. "Welcome back, stranger," the sheriff drawled. "Told you Mercy Ridge don't take kindly to saints." Elias glared up at him, blood streaking his face. "You'll regret not finishing it." Dole smiled, thin and cruel. "Oh, I plan to. Tomorrow, we hang you where she stood." As the sheriff's laughter faded into the heat, Elias stared at the empty desert where Mira had vanished. Somewhere beyond the horizon, the fire they'd lit still burned. And he knew this wasn't the end. It was only the reckoning. The morning rose over Mercy Ridge like a blade, unsheathed, slicing through the haze that clung to the town. The air was heavy, waiting, as if even the wind dared not breathe too loudly. Elias Carter stood in the center of the square, hands bound behind him, blood dried along his jaw. The rope around his wrists bit deeper each time he moved. Sheriff Dole leaned against the post where Elias had once freed Mira, chewing tobacco, eyes glinting with smug amusement. The same sign hung again beside the post, faded, but its message clear enough. Mercy Ridge had learned nothing. The townsfolk gathered in a slow trickle, drawn by the scent of spectacle. Some came out of fear, others for curiosity, but none spoke. Their silence was the same kind that had built this place, quiet enough to bury conscience, deep enough to kill mercy. Dole spat and gestured toward Elias. Here's what happens when a man forgets his place. He thought he could buy decency in a town that don't trade in it. He smirked, turning toward the crowd. And since he's so fond of playing hero, he'll hang where everyone can see it. That way, no one gets ideas about Savon souls that don't need Savon to... Elias met his gaze, unflinching. "You think you own them," he said, voice hoarse but steady. "But fear ain't loyalty. It just waits for the right wind to change." The sheriff chuckled. "Ain't no wind strong enough to move this town, Carter. We built it on silver, and silver don't bend." Behind him, the noose hung ready, swaying gently in the morning breeze. Elias's eyes lingered on it, not in fear, but in acceptance. He'd carried ghosts longer than most men lived. Maybe this was the reckoning he'd been walking toward all along. Dole motioned to his deputy. "Let's get it done." As the man stepped forward, a sharp crack split the silence, a rifle shot that tore through the air like thunder. The deputy fell, a red bloom spreading across his chest. Chaos erupted. From the rooftop of the blacksmith's shop, Mira stood, rifle smoking, eyes cold as flint. Her hair whipped wild in the wind, dust swirling around her boots. "You want a show, Dole?" she shouted. "Then watch how fast your sins catch up to you." Gunfire exploded from both sides. Townsfolk screamed, scattering for cover. Dole's men fired wildly, their shots shattering windows and kicking up sand. Elias threw himself sideways, rolling behind a water trough as bullets splintered the post above him. Mira reloaded fast, the movements practiced and sure. She dropped another of Dole's men before they reached cover. "Elias," she called, "get up." He strained against the rope, teeth grinding, until the coarse fibers tore through skin. Pain seared his wrists, but the rope gave way. He grabbed the fallen deputy's revolver and ducked behind a barrel. "Sheriff," one of the men shouted, "she's got the ridge." then burn her off it." Dole roared, firing his pistol toward the roof. Elias rose from behind cover, firing back. His bullets found their mark, 2 shots clean and quick. The crowd scattered further, running for alleys as the square became a war zone. Smoke thickened, curling through the air like ghosts of the dead. Mira jumped down from the roof, landing hard but steady. She moved through the chaos, firing with deadly precision. Elias joined her, covering her flank as they pushed toward Dole's position. "Didn't figure you for coming back," Elias said between shots. "I told you," she replied, breath ragged. "You don't outrun what owns you." They ducked behind a wagon as bullets tore through the boards. Dole's voice bellowed through the dust. "You think this changes anything? Kill me, and another'll take my badge." Elias reloaded, jaw set. "Then maybe we start with you." They charged from cover together. Elias's revolver barked twice, taking down the last of Dole's men. The sheriff stumbled backward toward the steps of the jailhouse, his gun trembling in his hand. "Drop it, Dole," Elias said. The sheriff sneered. "You ain't no lawman." "No," Elias replied, "but I remember what justice looks like." Dole raised his weapon, but Mira was faster. The shot hit him square in the shoulder, spinning him sideways. He dropped the gun, clutching the wound. Elias closed the distance, grabbing him by the collar and slamming him against the wall. "You hanged an innocent man," Elias said, voice low. "You sold lives for silver. Tell me, was it worth the price?" Blood flecked Dole's lips as he laughed. "You think killing me will change what this town is? Mercy Ridge was rotten long before me. It'll be rotten long after." Elias's eyes burned. "Maybe, but not today." He drove a fist into Dole's jaw, sending him sprawling into the dust. The sheriff reached for the gun again, but Mira kicked it away. She looked down at him, her expression unreadable. "For my father," she said softly. Elias turned away as she fired. The shot echoed, sharp and final. The sheriff fell still, his badge glinting faintly in the dirt. Silence settled over the square. Smoke drifted between the buildings. The townsfolk began to emerge slowly, faces pale, uncertain. For the first time, no one looked toward the sheriff's office for permission to breathe. Elias holstered his gun and walked toward the jailhouse. Inside, he found what Mira had told him about, the cells filled with minors, women, and children chained to iron bars. He shot the locks open one by one. When the last door creaked free, the people hesitated, staring at him as if afraid it was another trick. "You're free," he said quietly. "All of you." Outside, Mira stood watching as he stepped back into the sunlight. Together, they went to the office where the silver coins and the ledger sat waiting on Dole's desk. Elias picked up a handful of coins, feeling their cold weight. Then, without a word, he scattered them across the ground. The metallic clatter rang through the square, like a curse breaking. "Let the earth keep what sin built," he murmured. Mira opened the ledger, its pages filled with names. She tore out the first one, her father's, and let the rest fall into the flames. The fire devoured the pages quickly, the smoke rising in dark ribbons against the pale sky. When it was done, Elias walked to the hitching post, untying a horse that had survived the chaos. He swung into the saddle. "You could stay," Mira said behind him. "Help them rebuild. This place needs men who remember what right feels like." He looked at her, eyes weary but steady. "I've stayed too long in too many graves." Mira stepped closer. "Then where will you go?" Elias glanced toward the horizon, where the light was breaking clean and gold, where the wind still changes. He turned his horse and rode out of Mercy Ridge. The townsfolk watched him disappear into the rising sun, the sound of hooves fading into silence. Mira stood in the dust until he was gone. Then she looked back at the town, at the people now free, the badge glinting lifeless in the dirt, the coins half buried by wind. The narrator's voice rose over the fading scene. Asterisk, some towns are built on gold, some on blood. Mercy Ridge was built on silver and sin. But for one morning, the price was paid in courage instead of coin. Asterisk, as the sun climbed higher, its light spilled over the rooftops, warm and new. And maybe that's all freedom ever was. The voice continued, asterisk, a choice. One man, one moment, and the will to face what others turn away from. Asterisk, the wind carried the last words through the empty square. Asterisk, if this story moved you, don't forget to share it. Some tales ain't told for fame, they're told so we remember. Asterisk,